Welcome to Mental Health Today. I'm Mike Murray.
I'm Tony Clark.
And on this week's episode, we are going to take a look at a letter we received from the episode that we did 2 weeks ago. We're also going to have Mike's take, that's my take, and we're going to talk about political correctness. We'll have Truth with Tony and discuss next week's episode. All that and more here on Mental Health Today. Welcome back to Mental Health Today, and we had an episode 2 weeks ago, and we received an email back, some feedback from someone named JD. But first, let's talk about why we didn't do an episode last week.
Yes, before we got to, we had this all set up with what we were going to be talking about with political correctness and humor. And to show that, that we're not professionals, that we are actually two mentally ill people. I had a episode, mental breakdown, if you would want to call it, about a week and a half ago. And I could not handle filming a show on political correctness and humor. And I went to you, and I felt so bad about it because we're a weekly show. And I had to actually go to Mike and say, I am not in the frame of mind to be able to even do this, so we need to take a break until I gather myself. So for the viewers who are looking forward to the episode, sorry it's a week late, but as they always say, better late than never. I'm definitely in a much better mental place right now, which I'll talk about later in the episodes about, utilizing those free support systems.
Okay.
And that's what I did to get through it, and now I'm okay, so now we can move on.
And we do have tools to work on it. And you mentioned that we're both mentally ill, and the email that we got from JD used the word nut job. And I felt like saying, if you're going to use it, use something like Looney Tunes or whack job or something like that. What, nut job? But
my eyes went to that as well.
Yeah.
And my eyes also went to when he referred to normal people, and I just flew through the roof once I saw that. Because first of all, my argument is, if you accept the fact and call yourself a nut job, there are a few people who watch this who know that previously, a few years ago, and some people still call me it today, but some people refer to me as Twisted Tony. And I embraced that for a long time because I thought it was getting me attention and getting me popularity, when in fact it really wasn't. But when you accept some label like that about yourself, you limit your opportunity to grow as a human being.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago we talked about bullying. That was the big topic, and you received a lot of feedback on that. And that's a huge topic when you talk about teenage suicide and the suicide in the high school as a result of bullying. It's a huge issue on mental illness. But part of bullying on a smaller scale is teasing. And really, when they called you Twisted Tony, it's kind of a form of teasing, but when you're sensitive to that, that can lead to mental health issues as well.
Well, my argument was that I was allowing it to happen. And once I put my foot down and said, I will not accept this language about myself anymore, that's when I started to grow. That's when I started to feel better and freer. So my advice to JD is stop referring to yourself as a nut job. That's a self-esteem thing. And I don't when I started this vision with you, one of the things that I had in mind was I want to help the people who aren't okay with being called Twisted Tony. They're not okay with being called nut jobs. And they want to do something about it. Those are the people I want to help.
Yeah.
I don't want to help someone who's sitting there and just going, well, I'm a nut job. When you have that acceptance about yourself and say, I'm a nut job, there's no opportunity to further grow.
Yeah, and teasing people and putting them down, I think we have a little disagreement on this, but I think it's kind of a form of insecurity in that people will feel better about themselves when they put somebody else down. I have my own experience with that. This was back, I think I was 18, and I was burnout, which was true. But my friends and my brother would always call me the fog guy, and they'd always use this expression. We have a metro system, and one of the places that they stop at is Foggy Bottom, and when I sat there and I'd be like stoned and kind of like, what? And they'd go, do Foggy Bottom Metro Center, and it just bothered me so much that I was foggy that I felt like I had to be in tune suddenly and with it all the time. I couldn't let my mind drift, and that in itself caused me some issues. And back to what you're saying, it's more like, hey, look, it's not about me, it's about them, and shut the hell up.
Well, I'm appreciative of the comment we got from JD, but I'm worried too, because again, when someone has such a low opinion of themselves that they're willing to accept that about themselves, you're basically running into a brick wall over and over again.
Yeah.
And then wondering why your head's still hurting.
Yeah, and I think that if you really take a look at mental illness, and again, we have a saying at the end of this, if you want to get your arms around mental illness, give somebody a hug. And what that means is that when you grow up and you get negative feedback, whether it's growing up in a family that that you feel is treating you poorly and so forth, and you start to get older and you get that negative self-image, you start taking on self-destructive behaviors.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Those self-destructive behaviors can include addiction, getting yourself into situations that end up bringing you down because you're self-destructive.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I'm so glad you made that point. That's why I worry about people like JD.
Yeah, and we hope JD
because
gets better.
When you live so long thinking a certain way about yourself, it's very hard to untrain that. But once you get it untrained, you gotta keep moving forward.
Yeah, and
the Twisted Tony thing pretty much ended. We had an incident a couple weeks ago. We were both together, and someone we both know referred to me as Crazy Tony, and it really ticked me off. Just because I won't accept that language about myself anymore. I think the way you talk about yourself and the way you feel yourself has a huge effect on how you go about your day. And I wouldn't allow friend, not friend, it wouldn't matter. I don't want to enable that behavior. That's where my key comes in. I will not enable that behavior, and for me, to not enable that behavior is to walk away from you.
Yeah, and in my case, at this point in time, if I tune somebody out, I tune somebody out. And if they say to me, hey, why aren't you paying attention? Well, I'm just going to say, because I wasn't paying attention. It's just, you are able to train yourself and change your behavior. And that's the important thing that everybody needs to know is you can change. You don't have to remain in a negative path.
And the last thing that I want to say before we move on to the next segment really is to JD himself or herself, whoever it was. But I worry about people like you constantly, because when there is a lack of acceptance, people think, oh, I accept it because I can call myself that because I accept who I am. To me, it's just the opposite. You're not accepting who you are. If you accepted who you were and had some self-esteem and self-confidence, like I've been preaching since the first episode, you don't need the constant putting yourself down thing. It almost becomes like habit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, it becomes acceptable because you accept the behavior.
Yeah, and to people like ourselves who this has affected us, there's a sense that okay, you guys are overly sensitive. Well, maybe that's true, and maybe it takes time to be less overly sensitive. But at the same time, there's a difference between somebody who has self-deprecating humor and can make people laugh, and people who are self-deprecating who really believe that there's something wrong with them.
Absolutely. So thank you again, JD, for your email. I hope you keep watching and get something out of the show.
Absolutely. And this is why we love to get feedback. We hope it helps
and
others.
We'll also have our email at the bottom of the screen throughout the show. It's mentalhealthtoday04@gmail.com.
Okay, and talking about self-deprecating humor and other kinds of humor, and since politically correctness is our theme today, humor is Mike's take, and that's my take coming up.
Guilty of communication crimes. Was it just a binge or was I blind?
I'm going to talk this week about humor. First of all, I like to think I have a pretty good sense of humor. So when I think some things that are wrong or stupid, I'm actually thinking about things that are kind of funny. And that's what the thing about humor is. It's about being wrong and being sometimes silly or stupid about things. Only in this country, because we've become so overly educated, we suddenly have to be serious about everything. And everything inside our mind, our thoughts, our thought police, are watching and saying, oh, you can't think about that. Oh, that's ridiculous. Well, you know what? This country needs a sense of humor. Back in the 70s, there was a show called All in the Family. And every time Archie Bunker said something bigoted or stupid, people laughed. Here's one example. Archie Bunker was doing an editorial on the news, and it was his suggestion on gun control that everybody be given a gun on an airplane, and that way there's no hijacking. It was so ridiculously stupid and funny, yet today it's actually seriously being considered. Why is it that we are thinking this way? Why is it that we can't laugh? And for that matter, why is it that we don't have a sense of humor anymore? I remember the show Taxi back in the 70s when Jim Ignatowski was a drug addict, or a former drug addict. And he said, well, I used to do drugs and get stoned all the time, and like there was something wrong with that. And it was funny. There was a laugh track, and at the same time, we laughed about it. But today, that's not funny. We have to take ourselves so seriously, we can't laugh anymore. And suddenly, things are politically incorrect. And because they're politically incorrect, we can't laugh. We can't take ourselves less seriously. And for that matter, we can't have a sense of humor. And that's human. So are we trying to say we can't be human anymore because we have to be politically correct? The fact is that the thought police and even the politically correct police are actually causing mental illness because we're not allowed to be ourselves, because it's causing self-doubt. because suddenly we can't be confident in ourselves and who we are, because suddenly we have to be so politically correct that we can't be ourselves. And that's my take. As I mentioned in my take, that political correctness can actually cause mental illness, and in fact, it's happened to me. So let me ask you about political correctness. We talked about it before we started taping, and for me personally, it started around the mid-'80s, but it actually started much earlier than that.
Well, one of the people that know me will tell you a few things about me, and one of those things is that they will tell you that I am a politically incorrect person. Since the election has started, I can't tell you how many times people have referred to me as Donald Trump. I don't take that as an insult, though, because I do see the similarities. I just have a little bit better control than he does. I've proven it this last week. But for being politically incorrect, with political correctness, to me it goes back to the First World War. And everyone's like, oh my God, First World War, what the hell are you talking about? We weren't even around. But in the First World War, there was a combat condition where a fighting person's nervous system was stressed to its absolute peak, couldn't take any more input. The nervous system is either snapped or is about to snap. In the First World War, that condition was known as shell shock. Simple, honest, direct language. Shell shock. Almost sounds like the guns themselves. Then the Second World War came along. The very same combat condition was called battle fatigue. Mm-hmm. Fatigue is a nicer word than shock. Mm-hmm. It's very gentle, doesn't seem to hurt as much. Mm-hmm. Shell shock, battle fatigue. Mm-hmm. So then people are like, okay, it's a lot nicer, so we'll go with that. Mm-hmm. Then came the war in Korea. And the very same combat condition was called, this one always makes me crack up, operational exhaustion. Mm-hmm. Sounds like something that would happen to your car. And then came Vietnam. And thanks to the lies and deceit in this country surrounding that war, it's no surprise that the very same combat condition now is called post-traumatic stress disorder. Is that a grotesque enough evasion for you? Yeah. It's my opinion, if they were still calling it shell shock, those Vietnam veterans would have gotten their attention they needed at the time. Yeah. But smug, greedy, well-fed white people have created a language in this country to conceal their sins. It's as simple as that, and it's just disgusting to me.
Yeah, as an English lit major, I can actually think of Shakespeare's, one of his lines in Hamlet, words, words, words. We get so caught up in words that we're unable just to act and see what the person's talking about. Here's a good example that I've used recently is social media. Okay. You and I right now, face to face, we're talking to each other. You could say something, I can get the inflection on what you say, I can respond immediately, we can have a discussion, we can even have a debate, we could even have an argument. Yep. And it's not going to escalate like it does on social media. With all of the writing, with all the words, with all the back and forth. But when two people or a group of people are discussing something, you'll see that it doesn't escalate that way. Yeah. And the idea is God, we have so much hatred in this country, so much. Judge it on the person in front of you. Judge it on how they're acting. Judge it on their tone, and you'll find that, I don't think we have as much hatred in this country as a lot of people think.
My anti-argument to that would be, when this election started, 18 months ago or whatever it was, I had 103 Facebook friends. Yes, I don't know a lot of people. I'm not very likable in most cases. But I had 103 Facebook friends when the election started. And for those of you who are my Facebook friends, know I will post about anything. I will post about taking a dump. I mean, that's just the way I am. And people don't understand that. They're like, why are you posting every single thing going on in your life? And my argument is, if I really was posting everything that's going on in my life, this week would have been a lot different. So I do have self-control. But when it came to the election, I would post my opinions and who I was voting for. And at first it was Rubio, and then I jumped on Trump. And my point being is now I'm down to 74 friends. And I didn't delete any of those people. Those people deleted me because of my political views or my opinions or arguments, which didn't make sense to me because I a couple weeks ago I was so like manic high because I posted something on the NBC4 website about the third debate. And I can't even tell you what I said, but it was common sense, and it was, just me being politically incorrect and saying the truth that nobody wanted to hear. It got 186 likes. And I was like, well, then there's more people like me out there than I thought.
Let me ask you a question. With all this, since we're talking about the election, with all this stuff about Donald Trump and what he posts online and what he says, is it that like I said, people don't have as much a sense of humor anymore? That let's just look at this and say, is he just really just? Do people do people who like Donald Trump say, this guy is just, this is like funny, he's just joking?
Well, one of the things that I go for, and I knew we were going to end up talking about politics with this, I will say that I loved hearing the other day that Ivanka Trump, when she gets in the White House, or whatever her name is, the First Lady.
Melania.
Melania. When she gets into the White House, her mission as a First Lady was going to be to attack cyberbullying, which we just did an episode about. My thought was, she must have seen our episode.
Yeah, right.
But I was very happy to hear that. But for me with Donald Trump, the thing I find fascinating is that I think we fall in love with acting offended because the media tells you, look what this person just did. And then everybody goes and gets in an uproar over it. And it's the same thing on the other side with the Hillary and the emails and the FBI and all that. We all want to act like our stuff doesn't stink. And that we hold these people to a higher standard than we hold our friends. And that's unacceptable. That's where political correctness causes mental illness, because it causes you to be somebody you're not. And it causes you to not say what you really feel. That's why I love the book we're working on. We've changed the title several times and finally nailed it when we started this show and said, you know what, the book needs to be called Truth with Tony. And when you said that to me, my first thought was Tuesdays with Maury. And I said, but that's really what it is, because when we met, you didn't know who I was. I didn't know who you were, and we learned our own truth together throughout time. So it's Truth with Tony. But with Donald Trump, I just sit there and go, for 5 minutes he sounds good, he's speaking well, he's following his script, and then all of a sudden he just stops and says one thing that's not in the script, and it just goes bonkers. And the media focuses on that one comment. Yeah,
I think the media has a lot to do with it, and I agree with you. I think that we look at something like reality TV, and which is not real reality TV, promotes incredibly bad character, by the way, but people look at it and it's like an accident. It's sort of like they have to watch it and say, how could somebody act that way? And it's like you say, there's a certain amount of moral superiority to being watching that. But politically correct, when you really use that word, political, because politicians who have to deal with leaders of other countries and different conflicts have to be political. But why do we have to be political? Why does the everyday person need to be politically correct?
Well, let me give you an example of how my brain works, and this is going to offend people, and that's okay. I understand it, but it's all about knowing my own truth, and that's all I can share with you is my own truth. Let's say Mike calls me up tomorrow and says, my aunt died. I know Mike. I don't know his aunt. My brain does not allow me to be like, oh man, because I don't know your aunt. It's not tragic to me because I don't know the person. Mm-hmm. Okay? I know you, mm-hmm. and I may say, well, are you doing okay? Mm-hmm. And, I've always said at funerals, when someone comes up to you and says, if there's anything I can do, I've always told people, call them on their shit. Mm-hmm. Be like, I need some weed work done in my house. I need, mm-hmm. that kind of stuff. And people say I'm insensitive because when someone comes to me and says so-and-so died, especially if I don't know them, if I've never met them, I have no feeling about it. Mm-hmm. And it makes me appear to be cold mm-hmm. and insensitive. I'm not being cold and insensitive. I need to actually know the person for it to affect me. Mm-hmm. I accept that about myself. I understand that. And I think my friends need to understand that too. I'm not trying to be an insensitive jackass. I'm telling you the way my brain works. And I want to communicate that to people. It's just like I told you before. As my best friend, there's certain things you need to know about me. Mm-hmm. And I also believe that if you have a friendship or a relationship where the person isn't annoying from time to time, mm-hmm. then it's not a genuine thing because we're not always going to like each other. Mm-hmm. We're going to have issues. We're going to have disagreements. And it's about communication and getting through that. With political correctness encourages you to change your dialogue. Mm-hmm. And then you're not being true to your feelings, you're not being true to who you are mm-hmm. and who you want to become. Mm-hmm. And it's like, for instance, I love Monster Assault and I love Mountain Dew. If this book explodes, and Mountain Dew is a Pepsi product, if Coca-Cola came to me and said, we want to pay you $2 million and to do commercials for our product, I would say no. And everybody's looking at me going, and I'd be like, well, I don't drink Coke. Mm. And I don't want to promote the fact that I drink Coke because I hate Coca-Cola.
Well, I like Diet Coke, so I'll be the one to promote that.
Right, but my point is that I'm not going to sacrifice my feelings to be politically correct and say, okay, I'll take $2 million and promote a product that I don't even use myself.
Right. And
again, that's where I'll sit there and say, now if Monster or Pepsi come to me, I'll be like, hell yeah, I'm on board because I do those things.
Well, you're like the Bradys in the Brady Bunch. Do you remember that episode?
Yes.
Where they didn't use the detergent, but they had to check it first.
Right. Yeah. But my original point with the death thing, I thought about the other day, and I wanted to bring it up on the show, not just to show you that I'm a human being that has weaknesses and problems, but to show you that something that I feel or deal with, it's not to hurt the other person. Mm-hmm. It's just, please, by all means, if you're a friend of mine, tell me the person died, but don't get upset that I don't have the reaction that you want.
Yeah. Let's mention a hot topic when it comes to political correctness. Racism. Mm-hmm. Prejudice. There is... Bernie Sanders was talking to a group in North Carolina when they were doing the running in the primaries, and an African American woman stood up, and she said to him, "What?" He goes, "African American." She goes, "Why don't you say black?" Well, under the political correctness rules, African American is a way of saying, with respect to black people, today's word is African American. But if an African American person is telling you to say black, well, first of all, he said black, but then it's like, well, do I say black or do I say African American? And what it really comes down to when we start talking about this is, who are you talking to? Now, if you're talking to a large group of people and you don't know who's going to be offended by what, well, then I would lean towards saying the most respectful thing. If you're then it becomes individual. If you're talking to a friend, like, you and I could talk to each other and basically say whatever's on our mind because we're friends. But if you're talking to somebody you don't know, then you don't know if certain things are going to offend or not. So it almost becomes an individual situation.
One of the things you know about me from spending so much time with me, my wife knows this too, my family knows this. Yes, I'm a white guy, and yes, I use the N-word constantly. Okay?
Yeah.
And
I can't use that word at all.
It's not towards anybody.
Right.
It's a word that's in my vocabulary, and I use it to describe ignorant people. And that's the exact way it was back in the 80s when I was growing up. That word was used just to define and describe ignorant people.
Yeah.
At least in the world I was living. So
that's right.
It became part of my vocabulary, and it has stayed part of my vocabulary. A lot of the emails I send you
but
about
you wouldn't go to a black person and
not.
say that.
Absolutely
of course not.
100% no.
Exactly.
But I still use it in my daily vocabulary, and people say that makes me part of the problem. I don't think so. It would make me part of the problem if I was using it towards those people. And that's not what I'm doing.
And Randall Kennedy wrote a book with that word, and the book itself, because it had that word, was ostracized or was criticized. And I read that book, and really it was a book that just tried to explain the history of the word and what it meant and in today's vernacular. And this is part of political correctness that makes us kind of stupid for not having a discourse and not being able to become more educated so that we can not worry about those kind of words. Kind of what Lenny Bruce said a long time ago, that if we don't worry so much about the words, maybe some kids won't come home crying when they're called those.
But this is I want to get back to the political correctness.
Sure.
And my final point in this segment. They're only words.
Right.
Okay. One of my favorite comedians does a bit where for 10 minutes says every racial slur for every race in this country. Starts with white people, and he ends with Italians. And when he finishes with the last word, he says, there is nothing wrong with those words in and of themselves. It's the racist asshole who's using it that you ought to be concerned about. It's the context. So if I was going to certain people using that language, then yes. I'm not using that language in front of that specific group of people. I'm using that language as part of my daily life, but I'm aware of my surroundings. I don't use it, you know. The last time I did use it, I ended up waking up with like 75 stitches, you know, when I did use it towards the person it was intended to. But they're only words.
Right.
And with political correctness, one of the things that we do is we've created such a sensitive society trying to be politically correct that no one can handle the truth anymore.
Yeah.
Absolutely no one.
Yeah.
Because if we were living in a country, and this is just an opinion, but it's one I strongly believe, if we were living in a country where people could handle the truth, there I go being Tom Cruise, but if you could handle the truth in this country,
Jack Nicholson.
Donald Trump would win by a landslide this coming Tuesday. It's true. He would win by a landslide if you could handle the truth in this country. But we like our bullshit.
Let me make 2 points to conclude on this. First of all, the first point is that I've had this discussion, and now we don't even know the difference between racism and prejudice.
Yeah.
Racism, to me, is when you hate a group of people. It's arguable that racism is a mental illness, and Dr. Alvin Persant wanted to put that in the DSM manual as racism as a mental illness. To hate a group of people is not sane, is not rational. Okay. Prejudice is a little bit different, and it's much more difficult to overcome prejudice. And here's my example. I'm Jewish. And one time in Starbucks, I heard this person whispering to somebody else, "Oh, that Jewish person was da-da-da-da-da-da." To me, that's almost, it's prejudice, but it's almost racist. There was another situation where I told someone I'm Jewish, and they said, "Oh, you're Jewish! Oh, I have a bunch of Jewish friends! Oh, wow! Oh, do you celebrate Passover?" And that was just like irritating. I mean, I just want to be treated just like a regular person.
To show I can be a little different in my thinking, do you remember the first thing I asked you when you told me you were Jewish?
Yeah, you said, did you grow up with those values, or?
I said, did you make your own decision
Right.
on that, or did you just go along with what your parents were because they were who you were?
Well,
and that goes along with being politically correct. Did you form your own opinion, or did you just say, okay, my parents are Jewish, so I'm Jewish?
Well, technically, by religious standards, I am Jewish because my parents are Jewish, but did I grow up with organized religion, and was I under the influence of organized religion? Yes.
So the whole point to me, though, is that, and this is where we have a strong disagreement with this, and I think we should end the segment right here.
Okay.
But we have a strong disagreement on racism being a mental illness.
Right.
I don't think it is. And in this country, if you open up the doors to racism being a mental illness and being in the DSM manual, well, thanks to Bill Clinton, you'd have every racist motherfucker on this planet applying for disability. Because of the Americans with Disabilities Act, racism would fall under that, and you'd be causing a whole shitstorm. And so I think that it's not appropriate to have it diagnosed as a mental illness. And I also, my personal opinion, the reason it's not a mental illness in my eyes, you can't train yourself to not be racist if you are a racist. And with mental illness, I'm going to die mentally ill, okay? And I know that, and I accept that. When somebody, look at an addict or an alcoholic who gets sober, they start living a new lifestyle. So now they're, not, focused on living the lifestyle that they were living. They've changed everything about their life. For a racist person to do that, it would take so much. You know, and I the amount of money that this country would just be encouraging laziness, and there's no way to prove someone's racist either.
Okay, well,
that's another point, is there's no way to prove someone's racist. So how am I supposed to make a decision whether this person is really racist or not to get disability? So again, your argument...
Well, my argument is that people hate somebody for being a different. Hate.
Right.
I'm not saying they treat them differently. That's more like prejudice.
Right.
I'm talking about hate somebody.
Yeah,
and I think that anger manifested to a group of people is a mental illness.
Yeah, I just don't think you can do that, because if you're going to set a platform up and say racism is a mental illness, the shitstorm you're going to create in this country financially. Because you're all about finances.
Right.
And the shitstorm you create financially is the end of America.
Well, I agree with you in that respect, and maybe that's the reason why homosexuality is no longer on the DSM. They did.
And you know why they took that out?
Well, part of the reason is but part of the reason is they had homosexuals
Of course.
on the psychiatric board
absolutely, but it was
who pressured to take that out.
It was money. It was money.
Yeah.
And because, I could just be like, okay, well, I'm gay, so I'm disabled, so now I don't have to go to work because I'm gay. And that's not right.
That makes a lot of sense.
There's already enough people abusing the system, from food stamps to everything else. These people that have kid after kid to get a bigger welfare check. Each kid, their welfare check goes up $700, and that's why you have these families living in the inner cities, which are mostly single women, and they have like 9 kids.
That's so politically incorrect for you to say that.
Well, it's true.
But now you're talking like a Republican.
But that's my point, and I'd like to send a special thank you to Tommy Sotomayor for making me see that. He has his own YouTube show, and I would like to promote it here. He's an African American. He hates black people. He wants to promote a better living society, and he's trying to teach black people. He's saying, I don't want you to go out there and be ghetto and have your pants down around your ankles and stuff. I want you to act like a human being.
Okay.
So he's trying to do something about that.
But again, you say he hates black people. No, he doesn't hate all black people.
Correct.
Okay. Well, this has been a pretty good segment. Coming up next, as if we haven't had enough of it, it's Truth with Tony.
Aren't you tired of being let down? Another day, another shakedown. I'm with you when hope is gone and all you want is the truth. I'm with you, you carry on when they say it's no.
This is probably the hardest segment of Truth with Tony I've ever had to do. And it's funny that we're talking about being politically correct and politically incorrect, because after the week that I've had, mentally, with a lot of things going on, and almost too much for me, the old Tony would have flown to Vegas or California or somewhere like that. The new Tony decided to stick with my support systems and utilize them on a daily basis to get through. And part of that is Facebook and the support groups that I belong to on Facebook. Somebody who I had an encounter with before we even started filming this show weeks ago, that really made me see that my mission was clear in terms of what I wanted to do. This person had a bad experience and was going through their own traumatic event, and they posted a very genuine, a very heartfelt 30-minute rant on Facebook as to how they were feeling with this Facebook Live thing. And I'm watching it and I'm feeling so bad for the person. And, their argument was pretty much stuff we had talked about in this episode, that nobody wants to talk to each other anymore. And nobody wants to listen to somebody's pain anymore. They're too wrapped up in their own crap. And this person was so feeling about it for 30 minutes, just bawling in tears and screaming at the camera. Well, about 2, 3, 4 hours later, I was with my co-host at Starbucks and we were talking, and I had said that I posted a message on this person's page that we would be up at Starbucks at 1 o'clock if they wanted to come up and talk. I did not see the person. I did not care to contact that person again to see if they were okay, but my co-host insisted that I do it. So I went home and I left a comment on Messenger and waited to hear back. And within seconds it was, I'm fine. And the problem became, in about 20 minutes later, there was a post on Facebook from this same person in big letters, and it was a really long thing, saying, "People, stop private messaging me, asking me if I'm okay. I have 2 kids to raise and don't have time to answer your stupid questions that you can answer yourself." The whole reason I started this show was to help people who wanted help. And I have said from day one that I will not waste my time helping people who don't want help. And I also read an article recently which was very similar. When you beg for help and all these people come to you and say, "Here's your help," and you react saying, "Go away," I just want to strangle you. Because you're not being genuine in terms of, it's almost to me like you're just trying to get attention. Because a person who's just trying to get attention is going to push that help away, is going to push everything away. And then when everybody goes away, they're going to be like, well, where did everybody go? I see it every day, especially in 12-step programs. It's more prominent in the 12-step programs. And the last thing that really ticked me off about this experience was the person also blames their relationship ending because somebody got their boyfriend drunk. Nobody gets anybody drunk. Nobody gets anybody high. And if you truly believe that and you're a member of one of those 12-step programs, then you are not working the steps.
We hope you've enjoyed Mental Health Today for this week. What a great Truth with Tony, by the way, because you're making a great point, and that is that if you do a 12-step program, you have to come in with a willingness to work the program. You may not come in at first, but unless a person is willing to accept themselves as whether it's mental illness or an addict and work on it, they're not going to get any help, and there's nobody that can help.
And that was one of my points, was it wasn't just about AA and NA. I was using them as an example. When you go, when you first end up in those programs, you're not there willingly. The judge has sent you, your family has sent you, very few people walk in there. I have not yet seen one person walk into the program going, I'm ready to get sober. Or it's been a not genuine, I'm ready to get sober. But it's the same thing with NAMI and our meetings at NAMI. When I walked in my first meeting, my focus was everybody else was causing my problems. Now it's, okay, fine, that's irrelevant that people are causing my problems. What am I doing? Am I enabling it by sitting through it? Mm-hmm. Or am I doing something to remove those people out of my life?
Yeah, I would only say that there are some people who come in and say, I've had it with this, I gotta stop drinking, or I've gotta stop doing drugs. But yeah, maybe it doesn't sink in.
But if you're not working the program, and that's the key, if you're not working the steps to whatever program you're in, it's the same thing like with NAMI. If I'm not following the principles, then I'm not really, getting the benefits. It has been my experience, especially with the program, if you're not working the steps, and if you're spending too much time on steps, I don't think you need to speed through them, but I don't think you need to move at turtle speed either.
Right.
And so it just becomes a comfort area. But if you're going to these meetings and you're not willing to work the steps, you're not going to get better. If you go to NAMI and you're not willing to follow their guidelines, you really need to say, okay, is this going to be beneficial for me? And one of the things that we've always preached about before we close, I want to say that, just saying you want help is not enough.
Right.
You have to show that you want the help for me to help you. If you're not going to show that you want help, then I can't read your mind. But if I see that you're saying, well, I'm willing to go to meetings, but I'm not willing to work the steps.
And we certainly hope that you got some help out of this episode. And next week, we're going to talk about false paranoia. So, for Tony Clark, I'm Mike Murray. Have a good week.
See you next week.